It is rare I cover a game like this, because Iron Harvest is a game I really wanted to like more than I did. Uh, Interesting music. It's a game that I had my eye on for years, honestly, before it came out, and then when it came out, and then when the DLC came out. And I was very, very interested. Of course I was. It's an RTS set during a diesel punk World War One, or excuse me, post World War One era, with giant mechs as your principal units. Of course I was interested in that immediately. And let's be very clear. The mechs are cool. They're big, they're weighty, their animation is cool, their sound design is cool, the music is good, the doodad design is good, Gunter is amazing. There's some good story stuff, especially in the Saxony campaign, which is really, really awesome. And I absolutely love the feel, the vibe of it. The narrative of the campaigns, not as good. I'm not going to lie to you. Several of the plot campaigns don't really work all that well. And frankly, everything to do with Fenris, no spoilers, didn't work for me at all. So that just kind of... But everything else about the narrative worked very well, and I was completely with it. Especially, again, the all-important atmosphere. Cool. So what's the issue? Well, let me talk about how great the game is. It's got a form of co-op, which is really, really cool. There's cover-based combat, kind of like Company Heroes, but then there's also the ability to destroy that cover with various weapons, or also just the mechs themselves. There's great viscerality, and like seriously, you can just feel the guns of some of these mechs. It's really awesome. There's a lot of info in game. The HUD is well designed. The intro is passable. Difficult options are pretty cool. Yeah, so you're probably thinking, sitting here saying, Lore, you're not selling me. I know. There's two things this game does very, very well. Mission design and unit design. Now, that sounds awesome, right? And that's because it is. Many missions were good. Many missions got positive. Several missions got multiple positives. There is some very creative, very fun, very interesting maps in this game. You've got there's this mission where you have a train and you have to actually escort it through an area, and there's several optional things you can do to build up more forces, but ultimately your goal is just to reach this one exact point, but you have to hit the switches on the tracks with your own units in order to get your train to that point. The train is pretty tanky. It is a train and it has a giant gun, but it's not that tanky, so you got to deal with that. And there are multiple routes and multiple methods to accomplish most missions. It's not one of those there's one way to beat the mission kind of problems, right? So it's cool, and I'm with that. And a lot of the missions in the first DLC were pretty good. The second DLC, not as good. Not gonna lie about that. The second DLC, the Usonia campaign, was okay. Probably not helped by the fact the Usonian units themselves were just nowhere near as well designed as the other units. But unit design, right? You've got some really cool hero unit design, which allows you, you lose a hero unit, you can bring it back, but they usually have abilities, which is cool. I feel like I'm talking in such generics, probably because it would take too much time to go down the specifics. And again, that's what the review is for. This is the summary. But I will say, I want to point out a couple of specifics. One of the units that caught my attention most was the Smiali, which I know I'm pronouncing wrong. I'm sorry. I cannot do Polish pronunciations. I apologize. It's the freaking Scout for the Poles, right? For Polania. It's fast. It can turn quickly. It has a small hitbox. That's important for reasons we'll get to in a minute. It has a good, really long-range sniper rifle, and it can melee. All of that means it is a really, really good, but very specifically useful unit. In other words, it's very easy to lose that unit en masse if you are not paying attention and don't know what you're doing. But you can also use it very precisely. It rewards tactics, and it rewards precision controls. Stuff like that. There's a lot of unit designs like that. I should probably mention that the Saxony units were by a huge margin the best designed units in a game. Like head over shoulders. It's ridiculous. Again, I can't pronounce any of these things. We have a mobile artillery, which can also self-spot. It has a specific ability that allows it to spot for itself, so it can actually attack at its proper range. We've got a infantry murderer, for lack of a better way to call it. They've got a great workhorse, the Isgrim. I remember how to pronounce that one because they said all the time. The Isgrim is a great workhorse unit. It's not super good at anything, but it is good at everything. And it's the kind of thing that works really well when supported by the units. There's a really good mixed units thing in most of this game. And so forth and so on. I'm not going to go down the list, like I said. Some really good unit designs. If you're paying attention, I'm mentioning almost nothing but mechs. Well, so I haven't started talking about the bad parts yet. One of the biggest, weirdest things about this game is in a game all about these giant freaking awesome mechs, they really want you to use infantry. Now you can, but every time I tried to really lean into infantry, that didn't work because the infantry are barely designed. Not badly designed, barely designed. They are infantry. You've got grenadiers, you've got rocket people, you've got flamethrowers, they have varying speeds, and they all suck. Then you're probably thinking, well, you're supposed to use the cover, you dingus. Problem number one. Or rather, problem number two. So the game really wants you to use infantry way too often. In fact, there's way too many missions where you're actually restricted from using mechs and you're forced to use infantry. Cool. But there are way too many places. So the map design is really, really good, except for the cover design. I want you to imagine like a town square, a village, right? You look at that and just at a glance you think, oh, there's tons of cover everyone can take, right? Wrong. We can go in the buildings, although that's very easy to bypass. But otherwise, and by the way, shooting from in buildings is basically broken. Let's just get that out of the way. But there's no real cover painted on that space. And cover has to be manually painted by the developers. Cover is not something that naturally is grown. It's not a dynamic thing. It's not a procedural thing, for lack of a better way to put that. It is something that has to be manually painted on the map. And it isn't. So you don't have cover, so it sucks. Okay, so that's two problems so far. That's fine. That's fine. It's okay because at least the units control well. I mentioned earlier how much it's important to have a unit with which you know is very, very quick and turns quickly. Well, that's partially because units don't really have great pathfinding, and there's this weird delay to every order you give. And you have to start mentally baking that in. I got pretty used to it by the end of the game. But it's this weird just wall of irritation right up front. Because until you get used to it, well, hell, even when you get used to it, it's just everything is just kind of a little bit off. Also, in some cases, they just straight up ignore your orders. I never figured out if that was just a bug or something about the controls. But the core underlying mechanics of the game are very, very problematic because... Well, I suppose this is a good time to bring up probably actually the worst thing about the game. And I know that sounds strange, because I just mentioned two very, very bad things. No, the worst thing about the game is probably the fact that they don't do formations properly. Now, this is such a minor thing that I'm sure it's the kind of thing you wouldn't even think about if you're playing an RTS, especially a modern RTS. Remember, this game didn't come out that long ago. And think about StarCraft 1. You have a bunch of units, you say, go over here. What happens? Well, they all just kind of run over each other and then turn into this line, and then they go over there. And then they die one by one, because you sent them one by one into an enemy base. No, obviously what you do is you take them and you go, no, go here, and then go here, and then go here, and you, like, baby them over there because you have to. Because they don't really have formations. And StarCraft 2, they have formations. I believe, actually, Age of Empires 2, don't quote me on this, I believe was the first RTS to really lean into actually having well-designed formations. So you have a mixed unit group, you say go over here, they move in formation over here, which is important because you want to use mixed units groups. I talked about that earlier. So you've got these guys which are fast, these guys which are medium, these guys which are molasses, and they'll all move at the speed of the molasses, right? Sense make? But they don't do that here. Instead, the speedy people rush off, and the medium people are on the way, and the molasses people will be there in a few minutes. So that takes even more babying in order to deal with. But even that might not be the worst thing in the universe, if not for the thing that ties right into it. And that is pathfinding. I wasn't bringing up StarCraft 1 just incidentally earlier. This music is too loud. I'm sorry. I'm gonna go and acquiesce to that one person who always complains about the music on these VODs. The pathfinding is StarCraft 1 era pathfinding. There are several times when units could not figure out how to get wherever I was ordering them to. So there were several times where they would do that thing where like they try to go there and then they realize they can't, so they try to recalculate and they recalculate. And keep in mind, these are giant lumbering mechs. And this is why those scout units were so good. Because they could readjust quickly and because they had a small hitbox. So they would have less chance of getting stuck on other units. and the formation thing wouldn't bother them as badly. Hang on, I'm not done, because there's one last problem. Remember, all these maps are manually crafted. So in addition to not having the proper cover-based stuff all over the place, they're also too narrow. Now, this is funny, because you probably think I'm complaining about them being too narrow for the mechs, and you're right. It's really frustrating having to actually feed like 1 or 2 of your mechs at a time into the enemy base because the road is so narrow reaching in there that that's all you got. It's doable, but it's something. But what's really funny is because of how the infantry are programmed, they have the exact same problem. Their hitbox, their collision box actually, is about the same size as the medium-sized mechs. So that's not a way around the problem either. So bad controls with bad formations, with bad pathfinding on bad terrain. And that I'm not even getting into the other issues with that are just related. It's a bunch of little side things here and there. And that makes the whole game a pain to play. I was trying to sell my brother-in-law on this game, and I failed because I was honest with him. You know, I told him the good first, just like I told you. Then I told him the bad, and he said, yeah, I'm not touching that. And I don't blame him. And it's a damn shame because I really like the aforementioned atmosphere, and I like the level design, and I like the unit design. And they kind of nail so many aspects of game design. It is such a damned shame that so much of the rest of it, which is all the core underlying infrastructure of an RTS, is so terrible. I really am shocked. This game got almost pound for pound the same negatives that, again, several RTSs I've already covered from the 90s got. If that is not a deterrent to you, I do recommend this game. If it is, I do not blame you. I'll see you next time.